Well, good morning. It's Tuesday, January 28th, 2025 at we're calling the Selco meeting to order at 0800. We have first a call to order, which we've done. Next, we have review and consider approval the December 2024 bill schedules and warrants. Do we have any comments, questions, or motion to accept?
Motion to accept?
Second.
Second, all in favor of approving the warrants?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. With that said, move on to the next agenda. And meeting minutes of December 17th, 2024. Do we have any comments, questions, or do we have a motion to accept the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
So move to accept the minutes?
Second.
Have a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. With that said, we move on to the most exciting portion of the presentation this morning, and that's the 2025 electric budget.
Do you have another minute? I only have 1 minute.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Jim Zacco, the Director of Finance and Administration. I know Bob likes me to make sure I introduce myself. Before we start today, I just want to give a special thank you to all the managers and directors that helped with this, and an even more special thank you to Rick, Patrick, and Becca, who help with the forecasting, purchase power, connectivity costs, and then editing and writing narratives as well. So is everybody else just as excited for this budget as I am? Okay, perfect.
I went to bed early.
Me too. So let me just get the sharing going. And so this is going to be more of a open conversation than presentation, so feel free to ask questions. But to start, we're going to look at the overall Selco budget, and it starts off with our budget overview, and this takes into account the projects and stuff that span across both divisions of the company. So taking a look in 2025, we have some initiatives broken out for us here just by department. The IT group is going to be looking at doing some network upgrades throughout the entire town. They're also going to be looking at putting in new security systems, and with the new security cameras and stuff, there will be a easier way to search for different things. I've had this in one of my past jobs where someone asked me about something to look through the cameras. And it's like, they don't work that way. But this is hopefully going to be a little bit better technology to be able to search through. They're looking at implementing stuff like secure print, and we're going to be standardizing our cell phone plan and management. And this kind of goes hand in hand with our overall goals with IT, having more standardized devices throughout the organization. And I think some of this, the standardization part of it throughout the town. Looking over at human resources, we have our workforce update here. And we did end the year with about 79 employees. We feel as though that'll maintain somewhat flat throughout 2025. That might be a couple of additional hires as we level off some of the positions, but there will also probably be a couple people we'll lose throughout the year just through natural leaving, retiring, whatnot. Every year, HR kind of does a compensation study just to make sure that we are being competitive throughout the industry and throughout just the business in general. We're also, again, looking at just employee and team development to kind of make sure that we're continuing to keep our staff members trained and they have the proper understandings of the systems that we're implementing and all of our processes. I should hide this. On the finance side, again, we're going to be working on our warehouse initiatives. This also dovetails with some of the stuff we talk about in the audit, but we'll be increasing our internal controls. We currently are adding some additional warehouse space to help on the electric side, and we just hired one more additional person last year, so it's helping us kind of do some of the additional counts and stuff. So we're hoping in 2025 to increase a lot of our internal controls throughout inventory and update some of our processes. As well, this year we have a new auditing group. We're moving over to Baker Tilly. They are a very thorough, I will say, organization based on all the documents that we've been going through recently. And part of this change is just to get kind of a different set of eyes, but also we want to kind of get the audit hit every year in April so that we can be ready for our DPU requirements for the transmission PTF credits and reporting stuff. In the general manager section, we have one thing that I just want to touch base on, and it's a new building. Throughout this budget, you will not see any costs really related to the new building other than baked into some of our expenses are the preliminary costs. The reason for this is such a big project. As we start to do it, we will bring a whole special budget and whatnot for you guys to review and present. Right now, we are just at the state where we are hiring the owner's project manager. So we have an RFP out, and in the next couple of weeks, we'll be looking through and hopefully awarding that. But we do expect the costs in 2025 to be relatively short money compared to the overall cost of the project. But we didn't want to muddy the budget with the building as well, because those are two separate issues for you guys to vote on. Taking a look at customer service, just like we just did with financials and work orders in 2024, we will be doing a best practice review, which I think they call a BPC. But basically, we have somebody from the software company, NIC, come out. They sit with us and they go through all of our processes. And they give us areas that we might not have known exist or different areas for improvement. The one for the finance side was really great because we learned all these things, and now we have an actionable plan to go through and start to focus on little projects and things to make stuff better. And on the service side, I think there will be twice as much room for improvement because it's just such a bigger area. We're also looking at updating terms and conditions in 2025. With our marketing and communications, we will be doing additional outreach in 2025. And one thing I just want to call attention to is we will be doing a quarterly communication, which will be door hangers to all customers to kind of help keep the communication and the community in the know of what Selco is doing and making sure they don't miss any programs or updates or any of the events that we're doing, those type of things. This next section just basically explains the methodology that we go through for the budget, just to kind of be transparent. Now taking a look at the electric budget. We start again with an overview, and basically this first part of the overview explains some of our electric strategy, and in 2025 we will be looking to bolster our infrastructure and just strengthen the grid from that perspective. Some of the notable projects that you can see coming up in 2025, we'll be continuing our AMI meter conversion, and that should be ending this year. We have about, I think it was 5,600 meters remaining for 2025 to be converted. We also have a new project, which is the smart streetlight photo cells. And basically, these are devices that go on your street lights and protective lights that are basically like a mesh Wi-Fi that increase and strengthen the overall mesh of our AMI, but also give us the ability to do actual usage rates for those lights. So today, they're currently based on averages for, I think it's the how long daylight is, or I shouldn't say daylight, the opposite, how long it is night, and we just do kind of a formula based on that. This will give us the ability to know the actual usage based on the lights. We also, and this is part of what I just mentioned for the bolstering of the infrastructure, we'll be doing our 4 kV conversion, and what that is basically moving us away from older infrastructure in town that is 4 kV and moving it up to 13.8 kV. And that just is, from an accountant's standpoint, how much electricity can go through the lines at once. I'm sure the engineers in the room will have their own thoughts on how I just summed
Well,
that
it
up.
also, my basic electric understanding, because you have the higher voltage, is that you have less losses, line losses.
Yes.
Which basically helps us save money as far as not just speed, but capacity, but overall cost.
Right.
Yes, it's a good thing. We will be, the next item is our SCADA system. We just implemented this toward the end of 2024, and we'll be still going through some of the projects of, making sure everybody's trained properly and all the features and items are working correctly. Just for anybody out there, and once again, accountants understanding, a SCADA system is just your remote tools to access your substation. We will be looking at updating our infrastructure and mapping, and basically this will require certain field surveys. We'll go out and we'll get all the assets out there, and then we put them into our mapping system, and it helps with location. This also will increase the usage of our OMS, which is an outage management software, because the more accurate that information is, the more useful some of the other tools we have.
Do we do that internally, or do we sub that effort?
We are doing it internally with some help from a retiree.
Okay.
Yeah. So they'll be doing the field surveys. This is exciting for me because once these numbers are done, we'll be able to break out some of the electric fixed asset infrastructure as well, which will be nice.
Do we put that into, we use GIS, like an Esri platform to geolocate all that stuff?
Correct.
We do. We also rented a special device to get pinpoint accuracy, and which uploads into this.
It also hooks in with AMI, right?
Correct. And the next item, NISC Business Analytics, this is needed for as well, because that is a load balancing item. So having all that information and having all the assets correct in the system, that helps with. But we're excited about that one. We also have some battery storage projects coming up. The cost of these really will be minimal to Selco in 2025, but I believe there's 3 different projects, and you guys will hear more about those at different points throughout the year. And then another big one is underground conversion. As just part of our overall philosophy, slowly but surely we'd like to start converting the overhead to underground, just to once again strengthen kind of the grid. It's also, once it's there, there's less maintenance to it a lot of times because you don't have the pole hits, certain weather events with the tree limbs and those type of things. So it's one of the things that we keep in our focus to try to underground. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Now, jumping into some of the meat and potatoes, we are going to take a look at the income and expense statement. So, thinking back about August 2024, we did a presentation for our cost of service study, and we had Baker Tilly in to take a look at how our rates were. And they at that time had recommended, or we knew we needed about a 9% increase. We chose to go with about an 8% increase at the time based on, trying to mitigate rate shock within the customers. And their plan was a multiple year plan to help bring us to having a good, stable financial position. Their whole plan was based on increases starting in January of each year. We did not place the first increase until September of last year. So they had recommended an increase this year as of January. We're looking at that increase being more for the April timeframe. Due to that, what we did was we have 2 scenarios listed out from the tables I'll show you in a minute, in this budget to kind of help represent why the rate increases are needed, because it'll show the difference in the financial position. We are presenting scenario 1 as the one to be approved, but we just want you to be able to see those differences. One of the nice things is as we were going through our numbers, we actually tied into the forecasted revenue amounts that Baker Tilly had if we didn't have a rate increase this year for what our loss would be. So taking a look, and I'm going to just skip ahead so you guys can see the charts. This blue chart is scenario 1, and we're just going to take a look at revenue right now with an estimated 5% increase overall. you're looking at revenue of about $41.8 million at the end of 2025. If we are to look at scenario 2, we would come up with about $39.8 million. Now, we're going to, just for the time being, because I have a talking point about this, we're not going to look at the net income, but we're going to look at the operating income. So in scenario 2, you could see the operating income is almost at about a $700,000 loss, compared to scenario 1 is about $3.1 million in revenue, or profit, I should say. That's just the difference of what that rate, 5% rate increase should bring. Now, one of our overall strategies with this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next item on the agenda, but we will have 2 years of rate increases, and then the goal will be minor rate increases going forward. And the goal for this, like we said, is to reduce rate shock. What you see throughout the industry is sometimes rates are increased for 10 years, and all of a sudden 15% rate increases are needed to correct the financial position of the company. And on a customer, that can be very detrimental. People can easily budget, a small increase of, $25 a month, but when it comes to $200-300 a month, where am I getting that money? So going forward, we want to kind of have a strategy for that to prevent rate shock going forward. But so that's kind of the revenue side, and we'll get into a little bit more of how this affects net income in a minute. But I just want to make sure nobody has any questions on that. Okay. Taking a look at our operational expenses, they're expected to increase about 8 to 10% in over 2024's estimates. One thing I will say, our estimates are still on the softer side, so I expect those numbers by the time we have actuals to increase. So what the increase over 2024 is, I expect to actually decrease. And part of this is, on the electric side, we don't have our purchase power cost yet for December, right? That number will come in the middle of February. So we've predicted a number, but when you're looking back at historical averages, how high is December compared to other months? Some years it was the highest. Some years it wasn't even close. So we put a number in that we feel comfortable with, but we do expect the actuals to come in at a different amount. So I don't want anybody to worry when they look at the estimates over the actuals going, wow, that seems like a high amount. Some of those estimates will actually come out higher at the end of, once we've closed the year at the end of 2024. There's 3 main causes for the increase. One of them is power supply, the general and admin costs, and customer service. Now, taking a look at each category, our power supply costs are going slightly up, but this, and we'll get into this a little bit more in the next section, transmission's increasing while purchase power is decreasing. So we're getting a little bit lucky on that. The next section is distribution expenses. We're looking at an increase of about $130K, and the majority of this increase is just based on maintenance costs and new costs, like our new SCADA system. Prior to this, our SCADA system was homegrown, so there weren't really active costs other than IT maintenance costs that you didn't see and were behind the scenes. With the servers, all that type of stuff, they were kind of on the end of life scale. It was more of a homegrown system. So now that we're moving to a new company, there's now additional costs with that, because they are going to be, handling all of the networking and the stuff behind the scenes. So that is not going to be on our internal IT, which helps alleviate them and allows them to do other projects, but does come with an expense to have that outsourced. I forget the term. What's it?
Cloud?
Hosted,
It's kind of hosted solution. Yes, cloud, on the cloud. Now, taking a look at customer service expenses, They look like they jumped up a ton in 2024, but this is mainly based on one item. And it is our UA, or our uncollectible accounts. Our new system has this really nice feature where customers who have outstanding balances who have left us that we cannot collect through means of our collection agency, lien process, or shutoffs anymore, which is, I think, a dollar amount of under $50 to $5, the system remembers that cost. It keeps it on that person's customer account. If that person ever returns to town, we will charge them that cost that they owed us. With that, we have a listing of all those customers. So in 2024, to try to get the accounting to all kind of balance out nicely, we created a new GL account for that, and we want that report to tie to that GL account just like an AR aging would tie to your AR account. And with that, we had to do a one-time adjustment entry. So we end up in 2024 having a negative in bad debt expense, where normally we'd have a positive. So it throws like I think it was 120 and 140 between the two divisions of kind of a variance. We'll also be looking at with the auditors if this is something we have to do a prior period adjustment for, but we'll talk with them about it. But it's more fictitious than it looks from an increase perspective. Some of the other increases for customer service was just more the regular inflation stuff, and us bringing in employees. Now that we have them, they'll have their full year costs and all that stuff. In 2025, I will also be doing a full review of everyone's payroll and where it is going. So some of the costs may bounce around if we find anybody in the wrong areas or anything like that. But we should kind of be good with customer service. On the general and admin side, we did have an increase, or expecting an increase, of about $222,000, and a lot of this can be contributed to retirement costs. Our retirement group did reach out to us to explain to expect, based on a change of one of the numbers that's coming down from a retirement board, that we will see an increase, where we really haven't had costs in that area since I've been here. The last category is depreciation expense. It'll increase only about $45,000, and that is mainly because of a massive retirement as well as the addition, so it's the offset. And I will go into the retirement in the next section. Any questions on expenses? Okay. So we'll move on to our non-operating expenses, other income and deductions. So our other operating income we expect to decrease over 2024. We had a really high 2024 because of mutual aid. We had a few events we sent people out for, and then an unusually high amount of poll hits. And one specifically very expensive poll hit. So for anybody out there, expect if you ever hit a poll, it'll be between $3,000 and $5,000. But we did have one this year that was almost 50 because of the complexity of what they hit and where it was. Yeah. So don't be hitting polls, not just for your neighbors and that type of thing, but they can be very expensive. With that, we can't predict those same things to happen this year. We do expect it to increase over 2023, but not to be at the levels necessarily 2024 was.
Taking a little less than that. If somebody hits a pole, isn't it covered by insurance, and then aren't we reimbursed for the cost, or how does it work?
Should be.
Yeah.
Majority of people are covered by their insurance, yes. But you have to have insurance, and there has to be, caught up. But yes, we do recoup from their insurance, and that's where that revenue comes.
Or from the person,
Exactly.
if they're not insured.
Exactly.
Well, we don't have insurance that covers it.
Yes. No, we don't have to cover it. It's the person who
Hits
hits
the
covers it. Yes.
We could get, arguably, some kind of supplemental insurance we thought was a real cost, but it's probably not worth the premium.
No, no, and we have, like, our insurance covers more stuff like this year we had solar farm, one of the panels got damaged, and they covered that. So we do it more for that stuff, but when it's a customer destroying our property, it's usually theirs, their insurance. If we destroy any customer property, we then cover that.
Just to add a little bit to that too is, so somewhat of a pet peeve for me is literally every pole hit is the insurance company calls us and fights it and says they want to give us a fraction of the
Really?
cost. And so it is a bit of a time sink on our end as well to combat that. And so we do leverage some outside, because of quantity, we leverage some outside resources now just for that bell curve of cost benefit to negotiate a settlement in most cases. That just moves along.
So how much do we get as coverage? 80%?
We usually try and get 90%. We forego about 10%.
Certain insurance companies like to pay at least 15% less. I won't say that there won't be a markup for those insurance companies of at least 15%.
Right. The game goes
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Right.
So that kind of covers the additional or other additional items. Looking at the other deductions, this year we have a loss coming from our AMR meters. AMR meters are the remote read meters that you drive by and you pick up the readings. As we switch over to AMI meters, the entire amount of money that was capitalized for the prior AMR meters now comes off the books. With that, when you're removing capital assets, retiring them from fixed assets, you always retire the fully depreciated costs first, and then you hit what's remaining in depreciation, at least in our industry. All the fully depreciated costs came off in 2024 with a small section of loss, I believe, in 2024. In 2025, it's all the remaining items that have not been fully depreciated. So this is infrastructure that was still being put into place and that was capitalized for the 3% depreciation rate, all the way up until, I want to say, 2021. That factors in, as I'll show in the, actually we'll go right now. That factors into this area down here in the other deductions category. So as you notice, over the years, other deductions is kind of going down. And that's because the only really other item in our other deductions is our bond interest. So our Centec bond and our solar bond. Every year as we pay off more, it goes down. This year we see that number increase about 900,000 something because of these retirements. This is not a cash loss that impacts our cash flow. This only impacts our net income. So that's why earlier when I was saying focus on the operating cost, it's only because we wanted to, in that scenario, remove what these retirements, the impact they had on the net financials. Does that make sense? Okay. And I think that kind of covers our other deduction items as well. Now, taking a look at net income.
One quick question. So but the 300,000, just to put it in terms of cash, right? 300,000 is a cash item. It's just the 900,000 that won't be.
Correct.
Okay. Just to clarify that.
Yep, that's very good.
And by the end of the year, you'll be done with AMR completely, and we'll be talking AMI.
Correct. So on the electric side, we shouldn't see as big of losses in 2026 as we saw in 2025. I don't think there's any other major projects. But once again, that's on the electric side. Once we get to the cable, there'll still be some.
But there'll be building costs. We're not putting in this budget, but as we're thinking about it, there will be additional costs.
Correct.
on that.
Yes.
And we'll have to look at potentially financing and what that means. And so those financing costs, to Maria's point, would be in the other deductions at a certain point paying down the bond.
And when you say financing, is it always bond, or is there a different kind of financing that you would get?
I'm pretty sure it's always bonding,
Okay.
and it just depends how we want to bond, whether it's through the town, through the utility, or through a third party like an MWEC.
Before we go to revenue, just a couple questions on expense side, and might be more of a Chris Becca kind of a conversation. But just relative, I think inside, just as a starter, I love the presentation of this. You know, your presentation following what we have. This has made it so much easier to follow, and the description of everything has been great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well done on that regard. I think there's a lot of interesting nuances in the power supply description that you gave, and just as an expense, I just had a couple of questions, but also a couple of comments. One, winter, we sort of flipped into winter peak, right? Looks like January, just from the graph in the power supply thing, which is consistent with, I think, the region now, where we find ourselves. Relative to predictive model, this is one of the things that makes it harder, and then I guess I have a couple of subsequent questions that sort of touch on this. Hard to predict what the weather is, and that's going to drive a lot of the electricity usage, especially over time as we continue to electrify. We're experiencing a very cold start to the year. Is there any concern in, we had a really hot summer, and we're having really cold winter right now. Is there any concern on what that might do, not only to the electricity usage, but our peak usage, which influences other expenses on the power supply side, like transmission, peak usage, and capacity peak, peak, all based off of peak. Mm-hmm. Could that significantly adversely affect our numbers going throughout the year if we don't? It's unpredictable, but I'm just curious how much of a swing we could possibly see.
I'll take that one.
Take the impossible question?
The impossible question. I think those are all really good questions that we do think about on a regular basis. I know when preparing the budget as well, even with a few short months, relatively, if you could call 3 months short, we saw changes in transmission pricing that received from our forecast modeling that we get from MWEC. So we do look at that on a regular basis. I think the big advantage we have now, with respect to, say, the 5% scenario, rate increase scenario that we're looking at here, is with that the GTA is zeroed out. So we have a strong rate stabilization reserve, and we have a zeroed out GTA. So I believe even with the unpredictability of what could come,
the move we made in the GTA a few months ago was all predicated on dealing with that.
Exactly, and so the rate adjustments are to accommodate what we see as largely permanent cost, increases that just come over time.
Plus our peak,
And then-
plus our peak studies too, as far as taking a look at even on a monthly basis, as to when the peak may come, and the studies that we do, so that we can shave that to limit the amount of transmission costs.
Exactly, that along with the 3 battery storage projects we
coming up.
have, and the numerous other vendor contacts that come in. So, so I think we're hedged well in terms of being able to address unpredictability. But we do our best. I find, our model, live updates, and it does come in, has proven to be accurate with what information we have.
And our plan this year would be, if there was like a big influx, would be the rate stabilization fund to help balance that out.
Right. So,
Something I think that is becoming a little bit more predictable is rising transmission costs.
yes.
But a huge jump this year, 29%. Was that, in a way, largely dictated by a crazy peak month? Like, is it just overall expenses? I mean, obviously, the transmission costs in the ISO New England territory are going to be bonkers from here on out. But was there something that led to such a meaningful increase?
Good question. I can't pinpoint one particular event.
Can I go back to your last couple
Oh.
questions, just to add another
And you
layer
are?
to it?
And
I
you
think
are?
Oh, I'm Becca Keen. I'm our Director of Integrated Resources and Customer Experience. I think, Matt, were you looking at the load forecast when you were thinking about us flipping to a winter peak?
I was looking at the first graph in the power supply section, section 4, monthly power supply budgeted expense, and just
Oh, okay.
sort of visually looking
see,
at
yeah.
the winter is.
Gotcha. So what I was going to say there was the winter months are very high load-wise, but our peaking still
Peaks.
happens in the summer.
Yeah.
So in terms
Daily peaks.
yes, and hourly.
Monthly usage is greater in the
Yes.
winters. Daily peaks are higher in those
Yep.
really hot days in the summer.
Or even hourly. So the way
Yep.
that we're billed from ISO is all on
Capacity.
hourly.
Is transmission?
KW load, both are.
Both are done the same way.
Yep, capacity is a yearly hour, and transmission is a monthly peak hour within
It's every month.
So you get 12 scores on transmission, kind of?
12 on transmission,
Yeah.
1 on capacity.
Yep.
So I think in terms of cost, peak costs, I don't see that flipping any time within the next few years. I think you're right, just as an industry, we are going to move there eventually because of electrification, right? Like that is something that is being forecasted sometime soon. So in terms of immediate cost changes on the peak side, I don't see that happening in any of the next couple budgets. Same thing with the energy side. Right now, our current pricing is highest in the winter.
Yeah.
All of our unhedged position, all the spot market stuff, that comes in highest in the winter, just the way the pricing works.
And I just can't get, I have such a hard time getting my head around your capacity, not your capacity, but the capacity, ISO New England's capacity market, 10-year capacity market outlook of being flat with all the electrification
Yeah.
going on
Where
and,
did that come
and retirements and traditional generation. How could capacity markets not be ready to skyrocket even? Like, I don't understand that.
Especially what we just came off of. If you look at, the past 10 years and all the tumultuous stuff that happened during that, how does that just all of a sudden go away
I know.
when we're in this sea change moment?
It's crazy.
I have the same thought, yeah.
Okay.
Then
I mean, and then
transmission-
renewables coming online is only going to add more stress to the capacity market because of the volatility of the resource. You can't, the unpredictability of the resource. You still have to have those, for those moments in peak, you still have to have the capacity
right.
if it's not generating.
Well, you just tell the wind to blow.
Well,
So what happens if they're wrong, like their predictions are wrong? What does that mean?
Brownouts.
Flat brown.
Yeah, like, well, you're saying it's flat, right? So what if it's not flat, right? They're predicting it to be flat. Then what happens to costs? They increase?
Yeah, the spot
Yes.
market, you gotta go out and buy it.
Exceptionally?
and-
Yes.
Okay.
And that's where stuff like the rate stabilization and other mechanisms help with that.
so
Capacity is one of the budget lines we can budget with more predictability because the rates are set 3 years in advance, and actually we're skipping an option for some reason. So we have several years where the ISO New England sets the rate, and then we can plan. In the interim, that rate can be resettled multiple times, and we might pay more or less than the forecasted rate. But that is one of the lines that we feel better about budgeting for, actually, surprisingly. But with the forecast going out this far in our budget, that isn't firm yet. Again, they're only set 3 years in advance, and this chart goes out a little further than that. So, transmission-wise, Matt, you had that question about what happened. It's sheerly the rates going up.
Rates going up.
And those, again, were communicated to us in advance. We knew this $2 million increase was coming, and we know it's going to keep happening for the next few years.
Is it due to what is causing the increase in the transmission? Like right now, are there additional? Is it additional projects, like Order 1000 projects, or is it sort of more resiliency type projects? I mean, because both of them are kind of. We probably haven't felt the impact of the Order 1000s yet, right? It's probably more the resiliency. mandates.
exactly. I mean, I've heard of, and we've seen one just in our backyard here. Just the wood pole transmission right away upgrades that haven't been
Yeah.
that are still original.
Yeah,
Updating relaying systems, reconductoring, those types of projects I think are adding to that. I think there are efficiencies in creating those projects, and if I may add just a couple of points in reverse order. So I might have mentioned this at a prior meeting as well, as one of the big strategic initiatives for MWIC as our Joint Action Agency and holistic energy arm is to get involved in those transmission projects to leverage our public power business model to drive down those costs, right? I believe, and please correct me by misstatement, but I believe the minimum return that, the investor-owned transmission projects are looking to earn is something like 12%. So, which is guaranteed. So, I mean, hey, let's build a transmission line, so right off the bat, like whereas our model, I mean, you look at our budget presentation, 1%.
That's great return, I know.
And
Are they building more transmission?
And so they're building more, and we're trying to get access to it.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of boxed out of the process, and we're trying to get our foot in the door.
At NECC.
Yes.
Yeah.
That, and so previously, well, that'd be a whole nother, I guess, agenda item, but we've been leveraging different avenues to try and make that point and show that our participation will reduce cost for everybody.
And it's an important thing too, considering the pie chart of which is remarkable, and I think this is more, I guess, anyone who's listening. 67% of non-carbon generation is remarkable and beats any other, profile any other utility has in the region. Well, maybe minus Vermont, but that doesn't really count. Certainly in Massachusetts. But the reliance on Mill Point and Seabrook, I think, is important, and the longevity of those. So securing our place in line for some of those other projects that are maybe, transmission projects associated with other hydro resources, Hydro-Quebec, is super important for long-term viability of that non-carbon piece, because the tiny sliver, you look at wind, you look at solar, you try to do it, it's just really difficult in Massachusetts to be able to do that, so. It's a testament to, I think, Selco and the decision-making this body has made over a period of time.
Yes.
MWEC.
And transmission costs are across the board. I mean, look at the natural gas customers. I mean, their transmission costs have, much higher even than we have on the electric side of the house, as far as they're paying 5 to 6 times, I think, more for the transmission than they are for the actual gas. And it's all profit driven by.
Well, if I may just segue on that one real quick, is I think to your point, I mean that just shows, right, everything we see in this book and that we've reported on. It just shows this can work. You look at the pie chart with our non-emitting resources. You look at the infrastructure upgrades we're making, our involvement in transmission and capacity resources, and then the budget we're proposing is a 13 to 14 cent a kilowatt hour rate.
Yeah.
So.
That right there is the argument against the bills up at the State House.
Yes,
Right there.
100%.
Otherwise, it's a 20% whack we get put on top of our bill instantaneously if that bill passes.
You look at 36 cents a kilowatt hour for National Grid.
That's ridiculous.
So
You buy the soapbox, and Chris will be on that Capitol Hill.
we could triple our rate. You think about, let's look at the budget. We could triple our rate, and we'd be with the financial resources of a IOU.
That is
Where does
not
that
what
money
we're
go?
proposing.
Way to go.
No, where does that money go?
Give dividends back to the,
Okay.
all right, carry on.
Okay. Well,
Net-
Matt's out of the room. We'll jump back to
Now in net income.
net income.
Yes.
So with a proposed 5% rate increase, we have our two scenarios we'll go back to. You can see net income comes in a little under 700,000 with the 5% increase. Without the 5% increase, you're looking at a loss of about 1.3. Why this is important is because net income, it's one of those items that we use to add additional capital investments and we use to fund pilot. When you get to a scenario where you have $1.3 million loss and you're still funding a full pilot, that's where outside agencies like bond agencies can start to look at your credit rating or your bond rating, and it could put it in jeopardy. That has happened to other utilities. I do believe there's other factors that go with that, but that's one of the things we always want to keep a focus on. So that's why we're proposing, the 5% increase, and we would be, on target with our goals for our return on plant investment with about 2%. Any questions on that income for the? Okay. Yeah. Now, this year we have a new section. We basically always had a revenue in kilowatt hours area. This year we built that out a little bit more and is now power supply, revenue, and programs. This is an area that is created by our IR team. These are where the questions Matt just had came from. But it starts off with just talking about power supply, and I won't go into this too much just because we kind of talked about it, but basically, you're going to see power costs go down this year, but transmission go up, which is a good thing for us because it negates the overall need for everything just to go up. Apologies. No worries. There's a bunch of charts and graphs in here that kind of speak to that. You can see what our non-carbon position is, as Matt was pointing out earlier. There's a breakdown of how we hedge our purchase power, and I won't go through this and read all the items, but you can take a look at. And then it just kind of goes into a breakdown of our energy expenses and all of those type of things. This area is more informational for everybody, just so you can kind of see and understand from a purchase power perspective how everything breaks down.
We have a small piece of the pie in transmission, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Can you just fill me out? It has to do with down Centec?
Correct. Centec and Ralph both have a piece of transmission, and we have wave traps now recently for both of them.
Okay, so we do get a portion. There are some savings, I should say.
Yes.
In transmission.
Yes, we get a PTF credit that comes back to us, and we don't see it in dollars. We see it, I believe, within the bills. So just reduced bills. That is something that last year the entire process changed a little bit, where somebody at Eversource that runs it, they left, somebody new came in. At the same point in time, the person who we had as a third party had passed away, so there was a little bit of different people coming in and out, and time frames were sped up. So that's one of the things over the next year we want to kind of take a deeper look at to make sure that there's no costs that we could be contributing internally to transmission that we're missing out on that would help bolster that credit. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that captured everything. That transmission ownership is what makes us eligible for the PTF cost.
That's what I want to point out, that we do have a small,
Yes.
we do have some gain in this.
Yeah, and we will be continually reviewing to make sure we're maximizing that credit.
Yeah. Thank you.
We rely heavily on nuclear power to meet that requirement. Do we think there's going to be enough availability, whether nuclear or otherwise, to keep hitting the targets, or do we have any sense of that at this point?
Good question. I would say the shortest answer is yes. We keep an eye on new projects or availability as it comes up. That's that is I'd say a hot commodity. Hydro's big. We do leverage REC purchases currently, just for the point you're making. The number of resources, just isn't there for everyone to meet these targets. So we monitor the REC market closely, as we, I guess, is kind of a refresher from back to the power supply policy. So yes, those are long-term contracts. We expect those to be durable over a multiple decade time frame. New projects would be nice to see, so we monitor that. And then for the time being, as we seek out new projects, we leverage the rec market, and if we see significant fluctuations in that, then we bring it back to this group to evaluate.
So this solar thing here, what we don't get, they're all listed as carbon because we don't have recs, is that why?
Correct. So if there's no rec, let me go back to that chart so I can look. But yes, anything that, so any non-emitting resource that doesn't have a rec affiliated with that is not formally captured as a non-emitting resource.
That's game playing, yeah.
But we do track that, yes. We do, from a logical standpoint, again, without opening a whole nother can of worms, our state filing forms indicate a different number than you see there in the book, largely for the reason you noted, as some of the definitions at the state currently don't match a lot of what
The industry supports.
the logic supports, if you will. I'll just have to say it that way. And so one of the things we work on, and we're not alone in this, I think all public municipal light plants certainly feel the same way, is, we're looking to, the form shouldn't dictate the science.
Right.
Let the science dictate the form. So we're working on trying to get that form more standardized through our regulatory outreach efforts.
Okay. The next area in this section is for revenue and sales forecast. And one thing to note, these numbers we were able to get updated literally the week we were starting to finalize in print. So some of these numbers may be slightly different than the numbers that are shown in the income statement kind of section of the budget, but that's because we left this open literally until I think it was the Friday before we were printing and doing everything, and we couldn't go back and change the numbers throughout the entire budget, so you may see slight differences from the most up-to-date information. But it breaks down our revenue by class with kilowatt hours, and it's a little bit more of an updated version of what we used to have for this whole section. The next area is energy programs. Over 2024, our energy program budget is slightly declining, but that is not because of necessarily interest. That is more just to keep in line with a balance rates, right? These programs are used to help strengthen the grid and all of those type of things. And this is also one of the first areas where if we had to, trim fat or cut budgeted expenses, it would be reduced in these programs. But the positive effect of these programs help reduce costs in the future by strengthening the grid and providing different, electric saving mechanisms.
And you get the returns through electrification.
Exactly. And you can see here some of the different programs that will be exiting and what the changes were made to those. Some of the newer programs coming online in 2025, and one that they tipped me to just mention was the underground rebate, because this aligns with our trying to get everybody to go underground. So we will be offering rebates to people who are taking the initiative to underground their utilities themselves. And you can see the spending by the different programs with nice breakdown and understanding. Any questions?
Well, it's probably worth noting, and I think we talked about it in our last meeting, is that you used to be able to triple dip if you had mass save slant gas. That you could get the mass save 0% loan, plus you could get a rebate for putting in a heat pump, plus you could come back to Selco with our Next Zero or whatever and also claim a rebate. Now that has been, my understanding now is it's just straight the Next Zero for us. We'll pay that, but we're not allowed. You're not allowed to by state. I guess did mass save set that up originally? Or-
Right.
Okay.
Well, yes, there's been more, to your point, more focus on keeping the buckets separate, if you
Yeah,
will, and
yeah.
with less overlap.
And also, I guess a reminder, maybe Patrick Collins, that if you did do something for energy conservation in 2024, that you have to file for that rebate by the end of this month, January. Yeah, right? Okay.
One thing to note too that isn't really mentioned in here, but we do get grants sometimes from the state or from other entities. Those grants usually aren't necessarily reflected in the budget, mainly because we don't know that they exist at the time of the budget, or we don't know if we'll qualify yet for them. So there always is the potential that some of these costs are offset by grants, and we try to take any opportunity we can to maximize grants in those type of items. So like for, they could even go past these programs, but, with EVs, when we purchase them, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I just add one addition, just tying together a bit, something I'll touch upon in the GM highlights with the legislative bits. These energy programs, one of the key, I guess, legislative efforts that we're kind of rallying against, if you will, is the proposal to potentially incorporate municipal light plants into a mass save-like program. And so I think it's just, while we're on this section, I think it's important to note that one of the, I think, misinformation points made for bringing a proposal like that forward is that municipal light plants don't offer programs at the same level as mass save, which is simply not true. I mean, you could go light plant by light plant, and that might be true individually. However, if you look at the budget proposal we bring forward, I think it's important to note that this is a robust set of programs that don't need intervention from mass save, and I think all the data supports that these are far more effective, and so we do it at a third of the cost, if you will, of those types of programs. And I think by incorporating this here, if you look at our numbers, we jockey for top 1, 2, maybe we'll call it top 3, either way, a podium finish with, EV conversions per capita in the state. We're doing so. When we bring a proposal like this forward, it's intended to maximize that bell curve again with respect to goal achievement and fiscal responsibility. And I think, that's one of our campaigns is if your needs, they being the state or mass save, need a role model to look at, we have one right here, and we'd be happy to help. So I just wanted to tie that.
Good.
You roll into our programs, not us into you. We don't need to be paying, our residents the extra $50 a month that Eversource customers are.
Right.
Right, and then they turn around, they charge their customers, and
Yeah.
they bring in extra revenue, and then they divvy it out to their stockholders.
Right. So I
Don't get me started.
no, no, I'm proud. I think this is a great suite of programs.
Okay, so the next section talks about capital additions, retirements, and this first area just kind of is general understanding for everybody, and it kind of doesn't change year over year. But one thing to note is the schedules that you'll see a little bit later. Those are estimates to the GL accounts we believe items will go in based on current information. But as we go through the capitalization process, we examine things in much more detail. It really doesn't change any financial impact on the electric side because everything is depreciated at 3%, which just kills me because 3% doesn't go into 100. Can't divide 100 by 3%. But that's a different topic. We are seeing a little bit of alleviation from the restraints that we had with supply chain, but it's not 100% yet. So as we go through some of this stuff, we'll explain where we still have issues, like when we look at notable capital purchases, transformers are still one. We did receive a good amount of transformers in 2024, but we do have, I believe it's 3-phase still that are in our, if they are available, we will be buying and trying to commit spend to them. For some of these items, we will be cutting POs in 2025, but we may not be paying for it until 2026 or 2027, or sometimes you cut it in 2025 and it actually comes in.
During the previous years, because of the shortage of transformers, I know there was mutual aid basically where we were providing some transformers to other communities that, we'd keep a certain spares for ourselves. Are we finding paybacks are coming back, that we're leveling the shelves again?
Yes, so I believe we have a decent stock. I actually think there's a couple that we're just going to continue to do that with because we had certain ones that another utility did not have. But from everything I've been told and looking at the yard and the complaints of inventory space, I think they're starting to come in. We have a couple vehicles coming in. A digger derrick truck, which this will be ordered in 2025 just so it could hopefully come in 2026. So the purchase order will happen, hopefully I think it was mid-year they were looking at, and then a bucket truck to be placed at the end of 2025 with an expectation of it coming in 2027. Our end-all goal for some of these vehicles is to kind of get to a point where about every 3 years you're seeing one of the bigger vehicles purchased. Every year you're seeing one of the, whether it's a truck or a passenger vehicle, refreshed. It may not work out that perfectly, but that is one of the goals that we're trying to get to. So we have a couple of different other smaller vehicles, a single-phase trailer. We had to back away from the triple phase because it wouldn't fit in our garage. And then we just have some different tools that'll go for the substation and engineering groups.
Well, you bring up a point just real quick. Just triple phase wouldn't fit in our garage, which is one of the reasons why in a previous discussion we talked about new building.
Might be.
Yeah.
I might have
have
just
something
slipped
to
that
do
in
with
there
it, right?
nicely, yes. Now taking a look at notable planned capital projects. We'll continue work on the solar panels in the police station. We have these construction projects, which the letters don't mean anything to an accountant, but they do mean stuff to our operational folks. But this is all part of when we talked earlier about, some of the, what was it, 4 kV over to the 13. Some of that are these type of projects, but this is all bringing basically our current infrastructure up to date. Again, the smart photo cells. And then I just go into just explaining for the notable retirements, the AMR meters. So when we take a look at these schedules, you can see, the overall proposed spend right now for capital is about a little under $4 million, just slightly. And if we take a look back, prior, I think 2018 and 2019 were higher spend years because that's when Centec and the solar farm came online. But you can notice with the pandemic, we kind of had the 3 years that we had talked about prior that were underspend. And you can see we're getting back to, in 2023, 24, and 25, back to just basically making up for the time periods where we just couldn't get those type of items. One thing to note that throws off our capital planning, and this is actually a good thing, but is new developments, right? So as new contractors and construction come in, we do prioritize them over some of the maintenance jobs that we have. With that, we do get reimbursed that money, which ends up going into kayak, construction in contributions in aid of construction, and that actually offsets our depreciation expense. So there will be some of that, but you can't necessarily budget for that without knowing it because until they come and give the proposal, we don't always know. So that could affect some of the spend of these projects for next year. And I believe I reduced the spend of some items we knew that weren't coming in because one of the things that we kind of view this budget as is a tool to get approval for spend. So for items that maybe, like those vehicles, the spend won't be in 2025, we just want to make sure you're on board with us placing the orders, even though the money will come in 2026 and 27. For retirements, the major retirement is going to be the AMR meters. We also have additional retirements with those transportation vehicles. Those will be offset by any value that we get when we place them to auction. And then the rest of the retirements are just based on the standard construction that we'd see with poles and wires and conduit being ripped out from the underground and stuff. If we come down to the last table, you can kind of see what's in service. So one of the things I added this year were 2 additional lines. So you can see here our total investment in plant is $94,000. Our accumulated depreciation total is $94 million, and our total accumulated depreciation is $55 million. This leaves us with a book value of about $38 million. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is, as we get to other areas and we look at like our depreciation fund and whatnot, you may ask, okay, if we're supposed to transfer money into the depreciation fund and it looks like our plant is about 50% or 6%-ish fully depreciated, how come we don't have all that money and whatnot? One thing I firmly believe is that these 2 numbers are kind of artificially high. And what I mean by that is if you were to look at our current assets in the field, do we really have $55 million depreciated? And one of the things I've noticed in this industry, it's not just us, but we struggle with retirements. I've talked to a lot of my counterparts about this, and a lot of this comes from the fact that we don't have a lot of detail in our fixed assets. For most MLPs, it's just a lump sum of money. So at the end of the day, all this stuff comes out of the field, we're told what it is, but if you don't know how it went in, it's tough removing it, right? Because a lot of the fixed assets and stuff may have overhead contributions to them. Well, if you just rip out, wire, poles, and whatnot, what was the overhead 15 years ago that was added? As we break, and part of the reason I know this is high is when I went to break out our vehicle assets 2 years ago, we broke them out by what vehicles we had and purchase cost, and there was about $2 million additional cost that was fully depreciated that we wrote off the books at that point because we didn't have vehicles for them. We didn't have cost. So I do believe that is a little bit high, and I just want to bring that up so people aren't worried going, wow, we have so much of the plant that we have to invest in, but yet our depreciation fund doesn't look like it's going to cover that. My hope is that over time we can subtly figure out and reduce some of that cost. As we go forward, breaking out our fixed assets will prevent this from happening going forward. So that's part of our goal in cleaning some of this stuff up. The last are just some additional acquisitions, and these are just the purchases to inventory we expect to see throughout the year. Any questions on capital assets? Okay. So we will move now on to the cash statement. This first section just talks about some of the difficulty in budgeting a cash statement or a cash flow. One of the things I tried to run through as like a test experiment this year was how well we did in prior years and to see, based on certain budgeting factors, how something like revenue should be split. So if we are billing something in January, when does that revenue come in? Does it all come in January? Does a portion of it come in February? Does some of it come in March? And as I was modeling all these different simulations, I had different things where it was like 50-50, full in one month, nothing in the other, 70-30. If we were off just slightly on our budgeting for revenue, it changed which one was more favorable. When I looked at historical revenue numbers, we're always about 2% off at most. So maybe 2% over, 2% under, 1%, pretty close on our revenue estimates. But it always makes something like this challenging. So I just want people to understand that so they don't think this is a hardcore, like, oh, that's exactly the amount of money. This is more of an art than a science on that factor. And what we're really trying to determine with the cash flow is how much do we think we're going to make and how much we're going to spend, and make sure we have it positive. So I just want that to be kind of known so people aren't worried about one particular month might look a little, could look odd or something like that. I just want to put that out there. With this, we also modeled both scenarios so you could see how they'd affect cash flow. So if we jump down to the cash flow statement, you can see here that with scenario 1 and the proposed 5% increase, we are cash positive for both our operating cash and for our total funds. One thing to note, we will be taking out $1.5 million from the depreciation fund to move into operating fund at the end of the year. I wanted to make sure I highlighted this. Line 5, in theory, could be right under line 1 or included in line 1, but our starting balance for the year in operating cash is closer to 4.6 than it really is 3.1. It's just how the chart kind of shows it, because that transfer will go in. To explain, by statute, we are required every year to put in the amount of our depreciation expense to transfer that over to the depreciation fund. Some of this is methodology and strategy and whatnot, but you can also offset the current year's capital purchases. So certain years, and for a lot of utilities, you'll never see a transfer in because they always spend in capital what would be transferred in. We had, for the 3 years where we had lower capital spend, we had started to put in full depreciation amounts knowing we were going to increase our capital spend, so that was kind of planned. Currently, as a side project, I'm looking into what a good metric for the health of the organization based on a cumulative depreciation. How much money should we have in this account? I don't know if there will be a great answer. I've been asking for the last 2 years all these different consultants, and they look at me like I have multiple heads, but running it by different counterparts in the industry, they're in the same boat going, yeah, what is a good metric for us? So we will be taking a look at that. Additional items I want to let me jump down quickly to what the scenario would look like, or what it would look like in scenario 2. You'll notice without the increase, operating cash would decrease, and as well as our total funds would decrease in cash. And you're always looking, I don't want to say this statement because in cable I'm going to say the opposite, but you're looking to be cash positive for the year. Cable's a different scenario. I'll explain why. But going back to the additional items, one of the things you'll notice here is we have interest on our depreciation fund. This year we're going to be working with the town and the Treasury Department to invest this interest. Previously, we were actually giving back the interest through pilot, and that was a change that started when I came on board. And at that time, we were trying to figure out an appropriate interest rate, and the only bank account that we have access to is our Eastern Bank account that basically is a sweep bank account, and that was the interest rate we were providing. So at that point, we were just for the first time getting interest, so we didn't want to rock the boat, so we anchored it to that bank account. Now we're looking at, what interest rates really are, and they could be as much as 4 to 7%. So we're hoping to get this money invested so year over year it's building and going with the cost of living and helping us fund those things. Because we aren't sure how it's going to work, I still budgeted at the
Eastern
0.2.5%.
Okay.
But two other things I just quickly wanted to touch upon: the PCA fund and the construction fund. These funds, we believe, are kind of earmarked. And I say that with the caveat of the PCA, even though it's earmarked, I believe it's coming from purchase power revenue, which means it would still be restricted for purchase power. I was building this whole thing in this budget as I was researching these, going through the books behind you guys and trying to figure out how some of them started. And I ended up pulling it out because every time I was trying to just get one more piece of information, it led a different rabbit hole. So we're going to be looking into these funds a little bit more, understanding how we'd like to utilize them, if they should go away from this perspective and be put somewhere else. But the one thing I wanted to highlight with the construction fund, that is something that we see as being available funds for the new building or starting for the minor costs, that we might incur for the new building. But right now, we didn't want to remove anything or take them away because we might be able to utilize those for other purposes. Any questions?
Well, it kind of wraps up your electric side of the house. The question that I have for you is, do we determine today whether or not do we want to do a 5% rate increase as of 1 May, or is that going to come forward at a later date?
Our intent was to bring that for our
February?
meeting.
Okay. But now that we're aware that we're looking at a
Right.
potential, more than likely a 5% rate increase for electric in May.
Yeah, we will be we will be presenting that at another meeting for approval. And the next agenda item will be asking for some of your input so we can kind of understand where you'd like us to be for running scenarios for you guys for that. I don't know if you have to vote on the electric budget now or if we want to do both at the end.
Well, as long as the 5% is not part of the budget,
It is not.
it's just overall accepting.
Just
And we're really
accepting
just
it.
voting to accept your budget report.
Correct.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept?
So move.
Do we have a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you
So
very much.
Do we get a revised? Do we get, like, when we meet again, we'll have
We
we'll
can,
base it on,
well, depending on what we do, this was at least my thought process. If anything changes from the 5%, we would show you adjusted figures for those, the income statement and, those type of
in the
things.
cash flow?
Yeah.
And then will we have to vote on it again?
Yes. Well, at that
We'll
point,
actually vote on the actual rate
Yeah.
increase.
We're not voting on the rate increase.
Yeah.
Andy.
yeah. So you'll vote not on the budget, just on the rate increase.
Okay.
It's a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. And now we got Joelle with me.
Joelle,
And there's the other.
Hi, Joel Malaver, Director of Broadband Technologies.
welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
We're trying to present the budget for 2025.
Yeah. And so now we switch hats over to cable. And so, just like the electric, we have a cable-focused overview. And you can see here that in 2025, our biggest focus is really going to be the fiber project conversion and working to optimize our streaming platform and streaming programs. So a lot of these items after that talk directly to that. So we will continue with the fiber expansion, as you can see here, and we're going to try to have the majority of the infrastructure built out next year, and maybe even all the customers converted by 2026 if we can. We're looking at doing what we did complete. We want to make sure we give a little props. We did get the entire customer base over to Selco Stream as of August last year, which was a huge feat. The third item here, which kind of ties into the second one, is we're going to look to start a mesh Wi-Fi service launch. And this should help in certain scenarios for people who are on our streaming service, where you may have the ONT in the basement, but they're trying to get access into the master bedroom on the other side of the house. Something like a mesh network would help bring that connectivity all the way to that TV. Today, people can buy their own mesh network. What the goal or what the intent of this is, we offer at least a mesh network, so when we go to your house, we can have everything up and running by the time we leave, and you can feel good if you aren't comfortable with implementing your own mesh.
But it kind of, what it does is that people that currently have a cable that runs through their house.
Correct.
They may have refinished their basement, and when we come in to install fiber, we only can bring it to this ONT
Yeah.
terminal. We do not drill through walls. We do not, and if somebody's finished their basement, we just have to stop there, and then they have to get this mesh system.
Yes.
So that's what we're basically doing this for, right?
And this is more personally, but other than businesses, I don't really see a lot of residential customers putting, fiber in their house and stringing it all the way through, just because who knows, like, which one do you go with? You go with Cat 6, Cat 7? Are you going to jump to Cat 8? Once, things upgrade, how do you upgrade that? It's not as nice and neat as coax was.
Yeah. And my understanding is that we'll start bringing this on, but probably open it up to the general public come 1 April.
Okay.
About right?
Yes, I'm watching that 80% of the calls that are coming to the help desk is Wi-Fi related. So like Jim was explaining, and you too, Bob, a lot of these houses are finished before. There used to be a coaxial cable inside the customer's home, which is how we were hardwiring cable boxes. And what we're seeing is when customers are reporting that their system is buffering, is because the Wi-Fi connectivity is not robust enough. Like Jim was explaining, modem or router is probably in the basement. They have a master bedroom on the second floor, which is kind of the case of my house. And my house is not huge, but by having that mesh network, it will allow us to expand that connectivity. And also, we will have the tools. That's kind of the main thing. So when customers install their own meshes, we don't have the tools to troubleshoot. So we're kind of guiding them on what to look for. But if they have Cellco Wi-Fi with our mesh, we will have the tools to troubleshoot, and we'll be able to pinpoint which areas of their homes or which devices are not getting that proper connection.
You had a comment?
Oh, thanks.
That's pretty much it.
I was just going to more, expand that a little bit, and so to your point, right? The differences with the hard wiring, and I think that is key for some endpoint devices, whether it be a TV or a gaming system or a computer. But I think a big difference is, since we just talked electric and now moving into cable, right? Electric is delivered to your meter. We can assure the quality and reliability of that electricity to your house. And then I think it's just broadly understood by everyone. Once it's in your house, you use it.
Right.
Cable is a little bit more difficult because now we deliver that bandwidth to the ONT device in your home. But then beyond that, now your phone is Wi-Fi, your Google Nest is Wi-Fi, your streaming device is Wi-Fi, your tablets are Wi-Fi. So now if that buffers by default, Cellco and their internet, so
right.
this allows us to then just extend that a little bit further to get a better customer experience and boost that reliability for folks that aren't networking experts.
Are we renting out these nets? It's by the month.
Yes.
Yep.
That way you can keep up to date.
Much like the
Yes,
routers.
and let's say you had a massive house, you might want to rent more than one hub, and you could do so compared to somebody who's in an apartment. We have smaller mesh stuff, so it doesn't interfere with the other units.
Oh, right.
And we will have pricing once we complete our cost of service study, which is one of the
Yeah,
next
that's going to be
topics.
the next check.
We're doing this already, right? Aren't we selling a product that is a
Yeah.
Wi-Fi extender or something like that?
We not yet. We
Yeah,
are not yet selling.
Oh, I thought we were in that. I thought we were in some kind of Wi-Fi product that we were selling. No.
We have the routers.
We
We
have
just
We
have
have
the
the
one
router.
the one router.
Yes,
Okay.
we're not. We haven't implemented mesh yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with it will come like an array of apps and stuff you can play with on your phone. They showed me some of it. Looks cool.
And just to add in, using myself as an average test case, I mean, sending a technician to your home with the meter that can actually measure signal.
Oh, yeah.
So that way you don't have to guess, where should I place this extender to get maximum coverage. We can actually go out and do that assessment
yeah.
for you.
Well, it's not an extension.
And is this just how does this work for commercial properties? Or is it going to work?
We're not, well, at least on the first phase, we're not planning to introduce it to commercial customers. Commercial customers are more complex. They have
I'm aware.
a lot more devices, security systems, and we don't want to yet get into that. So we want to start first with the residential customers.
Okay.
Just, I mean, even using this building as an example, a commercial grade wireless is a bit of a different animal than a wireless extender, but that's not off the table.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
just not perhaps
2025.
a 2025.
Will it be, well, obviously, we're gonna have to make it available before you tell everybody you have to be on fiber, no?
I mean, this works on both cable and fiber. This is more for the again. This is more for the customers that do not have a robust Wi-Fi system,
Okay.
and instead of going to Best Buy and buying their own or Staple, whatever they want to buy it, they can pick ours and
Yeah, like just for example, I have the Google Nest mesh Wi-Fi at my house. I moved from coax system over to a fiber network and still use the same mesh because it can be used. I just didn't get access for some reason in one of my bedrooms, so this was the best solution. And I have overkill, so I could literally be like halfway down the street still on my Wi-Fi.
But to your point, others, like commercials is a wide swath of size. So, I think certainly this, if you're talking a commercial office or a pizza shop or something like that, I think, this is in that niche.
Small businesses
But
might be able to utilize.
Yeah, but if we're talking some of our large customers, they have IT departments doing commercial grade stuff. So.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about a bigger, I was thinking about a smaller.
Okay.
One of the next things I just want to address is we will be adding more ad revenue in with streaming now. It was one of the things that we temporarily kind of lost. We lost it on kind of a year we would prefer not to have because it was an election year. But Rick has done a great job in finding ways that we can get these ad revenues back because it's not as easy to go, not as easy to get with the streaming services as it was with the cable stuff. So we look forward to having that back in 2025. As Joel just previously mentioned, we're currently going through a cost of service study with Baker Tilly, just like the one we did for electric last year. We just gave them an updated budget last week, I think, and they will help us understand our rates better and where we can go with our rate design, for on the cable side. And just one thing to always kind of understand that cable and electric are a little bit different, and one of the things that the cable side has a focus on where the electric side doesn't, but is, competition. There could always be competition that comes into town. We also have competition with other services because you could go 5G, wireless, all those type of things. So we always have to keep our rates and prices with the market and competition as well. So it's just one more factor that we have to think about. Now, taking a look at the income and expense statement, on the revenue side, we are expecting revenue to decline in 2025. This is kind of planned, if you will, and there's two main factors to this, but the biggest one with our switch to, I guess it influences both, I should say. With our switch to stream, we both see people, customers cutting the cable cord now and going to other competitor competition, services. But we also lost cable box revenue. So we do have the smaller cable box revenue that will start to come in and help. But it was more the overall decline in customers. We do expect that to continue this year, but at some point it may plateau, especially as these streaming wars continue and everybody increases their prices, and you realize you could come to Selco Stream and still get certain, sports packages and whatnot. We also tried to push organizations that we buy cable through, so that they start to offer us more dynamic packaging, so that we can then offer those type of things. One nice thing is on the broadband side, as we switch to fiber, we are noticing people are increasing their packages because of the cost and whatnot. They go from a lower service to a higher. So that trend is upticking on the internet side, offsetting some of the losses of the signal. So I'll just jump down quickly to show you the charts. Here's just the 18.7 million that we think will come in for 2025. And as you can see, slowly but surely from 2019, we've been decreasing, and we're almost in half for signal sales. Coming in from an internet sales perspective, you can see it increasing, and phone has just been kind of stable, but with a little bit of a decrease over the last few years. Okay, getting into the operating expenses. Total operating expenses are expected to increase about 4%. It's about $600,000 for 2025. And this is in line with our traditional 1 to 5% increase we see year over year. When we look at transmitting expenses, there really aren't much. We just have some maintenance we need to do on one of our towers this year. Even though we got rid of regular coax TV, we still have certain signals that come in from towers. So the regular maintenance is needed, but it's small.
So in other words, the satellite dishes, we had seven of them. There's only 2 in operations. We're actually working on decommission one more, but it's still the tower. The tower is where we get all the off-the-air channels from Boston. So that's the main thing that is operating.
And when we take a look at our data center, not head end, maintenance expense, these basically stem from maintaining the data center. This is your hardware, your networking, your software costs for the data center. We predict that those will pretty much maintain flat in 2025. Taking a look at our connectivity expense, this is kind of a little bit difficult to explain, but we expect on the signal sales cost to go down and up. So signal costs in general are going up, but because our subscriber counts are going down, our cost per subscriber kind of goes down to a degree. Then we hit a wall where we have our minimums, so that if our subscribers drop below that, now we're at a losing money type scenario. I don't think we hit that wall this year, we're predicting yet, but just something to kind of be aware of. But we will see a little bit of cost drop because of the customer drop as well. So those are going in sync. When we take a look at our distribution expense, this is the one that increases the most for the 2025, and it's about $740K. And this is kind of for anybody that's out there that's thinking, okay, we're doing a whole new fiber network. How do we have expense when all the work should be capital? A big chunk of this is coming from our devices. So we just talked about the mesh Wi-Fi, as well as the cable boxes. In order to implement some of our plans going forward, we will have to buy a high volume of these devices to be able to implement. These devices historically had individual unit costs that were large, and we'd also buy them in bulk, so we'd capitalize them. Going forward, all of our devices we are expensing based on how kind of our system works and based on how difficult it would actually be to track and retire some of these assets. So this will now be in our expense lines going forward. In subsequent years, the amount that we would purchase would be much lower than in this year. I also hope that as we're going through this year, we might be able to keep that cost lower than we're thinking based on timing and in other items. But that's what that mainly is, that increase is due to. Taking a look at customers and sales, it has a increase of about 274,000. Again, the majority of this comes from the one-time adjustment we had in 2024 that decreased our balance for the uncollectible account process. And then the rest of it is basically made up because we're going to increase our marketing campaigns, and with a lot of the new compliance costs for FCC items, we had to add additional things to our current suite of software. One of which I believe is it News and Notes, Rick? What was that? News and Notes, is that one of the new requirements for FCC?
News and notes.
What was the new FCC requirement?
Broadband labels.
What was it?
The broadband labels.
Oh, broadband labels. Sorry. So broadband labels and some of those type of items. In order to keep those and keep current, we have to add certain packages onto our software, which we're lucky they have them and everything's working. We take a look at general and admin expenses. They're predicted right now to remain relatively flat. We are seeing the same increases in the retirement that we saw in the electric, but due to some one-time expenses in 2024 that were in that category, we do predict it that won't be in 2025. We predict it to remain flat. Depreciation expense is going to continue to increase with the fiber project, but it will also be offset by losses with retirements of the coax plant. Any question on expenses?
I have one question.
Yes.
Connectivity expenses, do
Yep.
you have an idea of how much of the, like a breakdown of that, like how much of it is signal, how much of it is internet broadband?
I can get you that. I don't think I have it in here, but yeah, we can get you that.
Thanks.
I got a question on is there a critical number of subscribers we need when it starts to hit the minimum and we start losing money completely on this thing?
Yes, but different channels have different.
Right.
So coming from just the electric industry and walking into cable and being somebody that was pro cable for years, I was a guy that watched 50 shows a year. When I started looking at how this is structured, and I was just like, oh my God, like how does this even work? Because just the amount of different channels that have different requirements and the packages, and I'm starting all of a sudden to be like, this is why I was paying so much money. But it is very convoluted, and I don't think there's one number for all of them. I think one channel, it might be you pay a certain amount until you hit 4,000, and then you pay the cutoff amount. Another one could be 3,000 customers, but it's not consistent.
It's the same challenges that we had with cable, right? Like just like whoever's broadband,
Yeah.
broadcasting determines what the
Yeah,
price is going to be and how many you need to.
yeah, it does not change with streaming.
No.
So, if I may add, I think three noteworthy points come to mind. One, just since we're in an unique situation to compare electric and cable in the same platform here, when we negotiate power supply contracts, I'll just say solar or wind or batteries, we have multiple options to pick from. There's a general market sense that we can benchmark against and say, okay, if you're proposing this solar project at a price of X, this one's Y, or we're going to take Y. It's more favorable. There is only one Disney. There's one ESPN.
Right.
And so the whole notion of having a marketplace or even some kind of fair negotiation is, in my view, from what I've seen in performing some of this, is largely not a thing.
Well, we had to do away with the Weather Channel.
The Weather Channel.
Came in and they wanted to add
so-
7 other channels. And we had to
Why did you
put-
bring that up?
Well, because it's one of those things that,
Still a sore point.
Yeah.
I know it's a sore point, but that's why we had to drop them.
Yeah.
They had no competition. Well,
Well, you know nothing about hurricanes now. So
Yes.
I
So
don't know what Cantera is anything.
yeah. So we do our absolute best to keep those in check. And when your base alternative to a negotiated agreement is a blackout, is not a great alternative. And so that's, I think, just a noteworthy thing to keep in mind in general with broadcaster costs is it's not a marketplace to negotiate and have alternatives. It's basically like, if you want Disney, here's the price. Yeah. And, and there's really no checks and balances on that. I think that the second one is one of the hedges we can look at with that to the question you asked with minimum customer counts is I do think, with TV and being the primary funding mechanism for SMC and other local benefits that I could go on about, we have been exploring other strategic opportunities with an over-the-top platform that we have. There are other MLPs that provide broadband services, and so by having an over-the-top platform and through trying to modernize the contract language, there are potentially other revenue opportunities to stabilize that. That's just maybe a precursor or foreshadowing of perhaps future conversations, but just I think it's noteworthy that we're looking at that and not sitting idle to just react to customer decisions. We're looking at what we could do proactively.
And looking at how we could potentially use ad revenue to increase some of this, because there are certain potentials that we've kind of heard about and we're looking into to see how we can do, how that works.
Offer streaming services to individuals outside of Shrewsbury?
Yes.
And if I may say, I like how Chris presented or explained our Selco Stream product. Our Selco Stream, our product is a very premium package, because if you think about it, you have all the Disneys, you have the Paramount, you have the HBO, you have the Showtime, you have everything in one bundle. So as you see, there's a trend now in the industry where YouTube is now increasing their prices and Hulu is increasing prices. Everyone is increasing prices. So when you start putting together, the cost of Disney Plus, the cost of Netflix is increasing pricing too. Now they're getting into live event. So when you start adding all these extra costs of having all these multiple streaming services, Selco Stream is becoming now a lot more affordable. So again, it's all dependent on what you want, if you want to have just sporting events versus having a variety of services. That's kind of what our product is catered to.
So you may see people coming back.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping into the next section. For non-operating expenses and other income. Other revenue is predicted to increase in 2025, and this is based on basically the ad revenue that we think we're hoping to gain back. Other deductions are going to remain higher than normal in 2025 as well as 2026. And this is due in 2025 to a $1.8 million loss expected from retiring the legacy system. So up until 2021, we were still adding to that system because in order to maintain the customer base, expenses had to be, and those expenses were being capitalized. So now those items, as they're being retired, are not fully depreciated, and we're feeling that effect through the losses, similar to like how we were talking about the loss for AMI meters on the electric side. Let me just jump down here so we can see it. As you can see here, this is where, the other income we're predicting to increase again going up, but you're going to see here on the other deductions, we're staying in the millions. Compared to prior years, there really weren't any, there was just a small amount. So now getting on, just to quickly touch base, our non-operating activity from IT service. So this is the services we provide to the town. We're predicting at this point about a $100,000 loss here. This, as we're slowly working things out, we're phasing out the difference in what the revenue we will be receiving from them is and the expenses that they are paying. And I think in their fiscal year 2026, it's going to start straightening out more. Because it's really tough to do because we're calendar year, their fiscal year, to have them line up perfectly. But based on all the numbers that we provided them and all the feedback coming back, I think this will straighten out in next year's budget a little bit.
So we should be breaking even, basically.
Yes, and the goal is if we have a little bit more, we throw that to them the next year. If we have a little bit less, they kind of make it up at some point, but that's more down the line. Taking a look at net income from operations, it is expected to decline, and right now we are showing a loss. This loss is primarily made up of the $1.8 million of retiring assets. So when we come down here, this is why even on the electric side, I was saying take a look at the operating income. That excludes that number, and you can see we're at about $1.9 million. We will see with a cost of service study, bless you, if there's any changes that are needed to the rates or anything like that, and that will be proposed outside of the budget, if you will, for 2025. Any questions before we go to the next section? Okay. Now we're going to take a look at capital additions. Again, this is just kind of explaining what capital is. We take a look at 2025 capital purchases. We're looking at a new fiber trailer, an EV pickup truck replacement, a utility bucket truck replacement, and these are smaller than and a little less money than the electric ones. We're going to be buying video receivers and muxers.
Enhancements for Selco Stream.
Yeah, the muxers, is that? Okay. I look at that every time and I'm like, what is that? And my PDF went blank. Bear with me for 1 second.
A question, we talk about the capital purchases. A lot of the stuff that's being installation right now is being done by contractors. Once we have the basic skeleton spread out and everything else, these contractors, I assume, will basically go away and it'll just be internal.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So I don't know why, but
Not speaking out of turn on that one.
Nope, not at all.
the next page is gone, so I will just read from here. No, it's good. So looking at planned projects, we have obviously the FTTP, fiber to the premises project. We're looking at data center security improvements, a data center generator upgrade, as we know about some of the issues we had last year with it. We are looking at a second data center for redundancy. We're looking at some network projects for software improvement, network projects for upgrades, CMTS upgrades, and then IT, internal IT is looking at different network upgrades internally. But basically all of that is to help strengthen the grid and make sure, or I should say the infrastructure, and make sure that, you know, people have access more readily.
Do we have an idea where the second data center would be?
Centec. So there's a little area outside our fenced-in area, and from my understanding, this is like a pre-built, prefabricated. They drop it right in. We're good to go. We plug it in, and they do some of their fun magic, and we got a data center.
Is that in conjunction with a second head end, or
Yeah, that's the second head end. It's just that,
the real word? Okay.
yeah, the new word is data center.
We don't call it head end anymore because it's no more coax. Everything data center.
You
I got yelled at 'cause-
2024.
My God.
Way to change.
Yeah, I got yelled at. I
Guess
had
it's
into
time
my
to step
budget.
out.
Yeah, it's like even cable. We're not longer doing cable. We're kind of
cable.
doing fiber now or
Okay.
streaming.
So we're more communications. So that C and Celco may switch from cable to
Communications,
communications.
that's
Right.
good.
Very good.
And then for notable retirements, we have basically the coax plant because of the FTTP distribution. A lot of that will be coming out. And just for anybody anybody at home, basically any of the infrastructure that we had in certain capital assets that was put in place before 2020 all goes. Because we know there was no fiber there, there's nothing remaining there. So the only real detail we have is by year. So we're just getting rid of the rest of it. So at this point, our additional capital improvements, I believe, are about 6.7 million without looking at the
second data center.
Fiber.
I was going to say the FTTP project. My thing's gone, but I've put all of that into the additional acquisitions area instead of trying to plug it into the additional chart that apparently is missing in my PDF. I don't know why it just blanked out. But the reason for that is we don't know where those will be capitalized yet, and there's a much bigger process that I go through with Joel's team. And at the end of this fiber project, we'll be going through a much more comprehensive thing to really break out our assets based on the known costs for the time.
So the 6.7 is in addition to the 6.6?
Correct.
Okay, so we're looking at,
In the 6.7, majority of it you'll see in the cash flow is coming from their depreciation fund.
Yep.
So as we jump into the cash flow statement, and I just want to, I'm going to close this and see if I can reopen it.
It's cold in here. So,
I got my nose is like, must be what? Heat pump.
jeez.
Okay, well here's,
Gotcha.
perfect, they're showing up now. So you can see here, this was the first edition table. This only includes the non-FTTP. And then I included the FTTP costs under the additional acquisition. So you're looking at a total of about, I think it was 13.
13, right?
Yeah. And again, I tried to break out, in this one, we added the accumulated depreciation and plant assets, so we could see that breakdown. Jumping down to the cash flow statement, you can see here in our depreciation fund, we're starting the year with about 25 million. So we do have the funds to cover the capital expense. We are predicting that the cash flow will go down this year on the cable side. Now, I just said in the electric side, we want to see cash go up every year. This is a little bit different of a situation. Reason being, we purposely planned to fund to add money to the depreciation fund to help fund the FTTP project. So now that we're spending that money, we should see it declining. So that's why you're seeing this. It's exactly what we want to see at that point. Taking a look, we're expecting to end the year around 33.4 million, and it should be enough to complete the fiber project and the other capital projects for the year. We have a very strong position in the cable right now for cash.
When we say we're going to finish the fiber, how are we finishing all these multi-dwellings by the end of the year?
That's the challenge.
That's 2026.
So, I mean, there are 26 MDU buildings in Shrewsbury. In 2024, we actually made a lot of progress. We got a couple of them built. There's 18 of them left. We are actually in the process of working with the different management companies that they kind of control these facilities, and that's kind of the challenge is they are all unique. They are different management facilities, and is trying to work with them because a lot of, as we have been talking about Wi-Fi mesh, a lot of the cable, the coaxial was built within the customer's walls. So now we have to retrofit these buildings now with fiber. So it's not a cookie cutter type of deployment. So every building is unique. And so far we are in the plans. We're starting with Southgate in the end of February, and we're also tackling Madison Place. Again, different solutions for each of them, and we're also working with Shrewsbury Commons. So we're trying to start with the largest MDUs in town. So hopefully, we feel that we're going to learn a lot from retrofitting them, so we can start with the smaller.
Are we and our contractors the one pulling the fiber into these
Yes,
places? They
it's
don't
going to
have
be a joint situation, a joint effort, especially since we're getting to, these units are already occupied. The way how we have been building plant is just on the poles or underground conduit, which we own. So we always had access 24/7. Now we got to get into customers' units. So there's a lot of scheduling and communication going on. So we feel it's key having one of our Selco employees on site all the time as we're working, so that they can keep that channel of communication going and help us with this.
But are you pulling through the walls?
We are
Or are you
working
going outside?
around it. Yeah, we in some of the units we're working through the outside. In some of them they have like drop down ceilings, so we're taking that drop down ceiling and kind of fishing it through the top of the unit instead of coming from the usual places. But every unit is different. We're trying to also use some of the utility closets that are shared. They're kind of always staggered. But yes, we will have to, in some cases, we will be opening walls and fishing wires. So it is a challenge.
And just to clarify too, the 2025 plan is to kind of finish with the infrastructure layout. Converting all the customers over is still a 2026 plan. And that could be too aggressive. We'll figure that out. But we will also, to help with the 2026 plan, be sunsetting sections of town. So basically, you have to move over. You don't have internet, so that we can move on and get certain devices back and get certain devices in and out.
Do we know the percentage of customers that are in a multi-dwelling housing?
It's only 18% of the premises. It's a little bit under. It's near 3,000-ish
Customers?
Customers.
Okay.
I am planning to present a full schedule later on to the commission.
Well,
Very
yeah,
exciting to see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'll expand this just a little bit more. We've got 40Bs, we got nasty 40Bs, we got nice 40Bs,
Yeah, right.
and all this other stuff. When they come into town, do they have to come through us or through part of to verify that they're laying the fiber capabilities
Yes.
in their construction?
Yeah, and since we are the electric utility, we usually they all have to work with us, and we work very closely with the electric side, and they let us know whenever there's a new unit being built, and we also provide our requirements for the broadband side of things.
Yeah, we have a few new construction examples that are very nice.
Okay. So what else?
That is it.
Yeah.
Any
Okay.
questions?
No?
Good job.
Thank you. You have a motion to just accept the report of the cable? Yes. Well,
moved.
or fiber or whatever we're going
I
to
know.
call it.
Communications.
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 Second?
Second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We have something about talking about rate
Yes.
discovery, but I don't have any.
Rate revenue recovery.
Yeah, it says discussion of approach to
Rate design, revenues
and revenue recovery.
Exactly.
It's a discussion.
Discussion.
But we do have a couple of slides.
Okay.
Or question.
And this is about as long as those two budget reports, right?
Another 2 hours. budgeted.
I get to talk less in this one.
Chris, do you want to open this? I'm just going to join the meeting and
Sure.
load up slides.
So, thinking about this in reverse, we could have gone cable, then electric, and then this agenda item, but hindsight's 2020. So thinking back to electric budget and our question about the 5% increase, basically the question at hand is, if you recall from our electric cost of service study, each rate class has a cost to serve, and we were migrating each class closer to that cost of service study. So I guess some of the insight we're looking to gather is for our February meeting, basically we're looking to try and bring forward a few different rate increase scenarios to capture that 5% adjustment that we need to stabilize that budget proposal. So for example, I think it's in your slides now that you have them. So I think I see it here. But for instance, do we do a 5% rate adjustment for all of our rate classes, residential, commercial, municipal, protective lighting, so on and so forth? Do we leave, or arguably we could do a 0% rate adjustment for residential, but then that 5% becomes 10% at other rate classes, or some combination of the two. So this was more as a slight refresher and ask for some input and guidance on the scenarios we could bring forward to continue that progress towards a cost of service study level.
Okay.
Quick question. I know we're going to talk about this, but if getting back to your comment right there, if we did do a low income rate, how would that impact that 5%?
That is part of the discussion. And there are several other utilities with low income rates that we could mimic the structure of those and then bring those forward to you, or we could get creative with it. So that's another thing we could also work into this analysis that we'll provide to you for next month. And also, just on that point, I think low income rate would be later. We're targeting this 5% increase for May. I think developing this new rate would be a little more complicated, so that would be something that would probably come later in the year. So wouldn't pressure you to make a decision on that.
Yeah,
within the
but
next month.
if we're trying to get to a 5% increase overall, right, and then we do we don't do an increase, so it's going to impact the 5%. So doesn't it need to be done in conjunction?
Well, we can model it several different ways.
So I get to appreciate the question too, because I'll take.
Well, let's go with a brief.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay, yeah, there's just a couple slides that are meant to be visuals to support this discussion. Whoops. Okay, so this will look familiar. Jim just showed you this chart as part of the budget presentation. It is the overview of Baker Tilly's results that generally just show that they gave us a plan that would suggest we needed consecutive rate increases in multiple years. So it's just that overarching view of where our needed rate increases were per the results of that study. You can see that in 2024, that planned rate increase brought us just to cost of service. We were a hair above at 0.32%. The reason we're having this discussion right now is if you look over to 2025, it indicates we needed another rate increase this year to keep at cost of service. So that's just visual there. I won't get into the numbers too in depth.
Were we close on 2024? Did we hit whatever marks that we thought?
Well, each year, though, is individual in itself.
Right.
So in 2024, the increase that was proposed for January. So since it was in September,
okay,
we didn't necessarily hit our revenue requirements, but we corrected the situation going forward. So now, looking at 2025, if we were to start in January, we would be under about 1.73?
Yep.
Yeah. So at this time, when we were running our scenarios, we're going, okay, since we were a little late in 2024 and we're going to be a little late in 2025, and then you're looking at a larger number in 2026, we're saying instead of just trying to go for a 2% this year and then next year looking at like a 3 or a 4%, let's try to see if we can bring a 5% forward, and what does that do for us next year at that point? And we'll probably run more modeling and simulations to kind of understand. But some of the rate design proposed for this year is also to kind of make up, if you will, for the shortfall of last year a little bit.
And we did model following this plan exactly, so implementing about a 2% increase for 25, and we were still well below our revenue target that Jim wanted to see us at. We were still gonna end the year in the hole, which is why we said, okay, since we're not starting it till several months into the calendar year, let's make it a little larger increase and get us in a good position to also do another rate increase in January next year, so we can have a buffer in between, and we're not just, every month doing rate increases to try to catch where we should be.
But what did you use again for the budget?
We used the 5%.
You used 5% coming in
in
May.
May.
Okay.
And why so late in the year? Is it for notice requirements, or is it?
It was
I thought we
more.
could do faster than that.
More, you just did one in September.
Okay.
You don't
A
really
timing
want to
issue.
do one in.
Yeah, I don't.
It was more, how do you avoid rate shock? And,
Yeah.
we
And use is way off in, I guess, April, May versus the winter time.
Exactly. And the big goal for all of this is straightening everything out going forward, right?
Yeah.
So each year matters, but we also want to get a good plan to get this so that, in the long run, we now are in a good steady state.
Do we have a sense of what 5% means on a per household cost?
Depends on how we apply it. So that should come up in some of the other slides. Here is what the cost of service study reported back per individual rate class and how they were positioned respective to their cost of service. So this is prior to the rate increase we just implemented. It tells you where, how much more revenue we needed to glean from each rate class to get them up to the cost of service, right? So this is the scientific result that Baker Tilly gave us back in September. And you'll see that if you look at the list, it's not even across the rate classes, of course. It rarely is. So there were some rate classes that were well under their cost of service and some that were a little bit even. The only one that actually was returning any sort of margin is GS2, and it barely made it to cost of service. It was about $34,000 in revenue. So that was the scientific result of their study. What we actually implemented was this plan. And so this should look familiar. Based on the results we saw in that last chart, what we chose to do was to give residential a 5% increase and then put more of the burden, if you will, on the commercial class because they were well below cost of service. So they got a 25% increase. Municipal got 10%, and the lighting got 30%. They got the largest increase, but as you can see from this chart, they're still well under cost of service, and we probably need to target them a little more detailed with this rate increase. All right, so that's all just reminders from the cost of service study. The other context we wanted to provide was where we are in the marketplace compared to other utilities with our rates. So here is, you'll all recognize this. This is MWIC's rate comparison chart that they provide quarterly. And this data includes our current rates and where we stand. So this is from September. You'll see that this is the residential chart. The average bill cost for a household consuming 750 kilowatt hours a month. We are still way at the bottom of the list, 38th out of the 45 utilities presented. So I think the message here was we still have a little wiggle room, I think, to bring the rates up where they need to be. We won't be at the top of the list if we do an increase on residential. The same is true for commercial. We're still at, what would you say, that the bottom third at $504 in a month, and we're still 32nd out of 45 utilities. And the same is true for large commercial and industrial. I think this is the most pronounced area that we need to pay attention to. Our rates for the large industrial customers are third from the bottom in the state. So we think maybe that's something we should bear in mind when we talk about applying this 5%.
Question, does that include the new construction in Grafton and Shrewsbury with the UPS distributorship? Are they considered a large? Okay, thank you.
They are. There's a little more nuance to that maybe we should talk about after the meeting, because we have some other thoughts on what we should do with that project. And actually, Mike, going back to your question about the 5% impact to a household, I thought that was in the slides, but it's not. If I recall correctly, we did 5% for residential in September, and that was about $5 a month.
Okay.
An increase, I believe, maybe less.
1% is
And,
$1.
I don't know, Patrick, or you might remember better than me what that dollar increase was, but I think it was under $5 a month.
Yeah, I mean, typically 750 kilowatts is $105, $110 with customer charge.
Yep.
So a flat 5% would only be about $5 per month
Okay.
for the average user.
So that's all the data we're supplying you with today, just to help set the tone for the discussion. The questions we're thinking we'd like to get answered, just in a general sense from you, is what scenarios you want to bring you next month when we want to actually propose the rate increase and hopefully have you approve it.
So instead of us just trying to pick a bunch, we want to kind of get your input so we can focus on things that you guys are interested in or direction you're interested in. And not that we won't add additional ones ourselves.
On the 30% increase or so on the large commercial customers, what was that amount? That's my first question. The second question is, I know Maria has a business. I know you maybe transferred your business to your sons. Have you heard or felt the impact of the rate change? Or is it something that doesn't seem like it?
It's not such a big expense for them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a big expense item for me.
So if you had that slide, I think, also in the interest of time, we had several makes it too many. A few scenarios that we thought would you'd be most likely interested in. I think it's kind of the ones I was saying before is at least a benchmarking scenario where everyone gets 5%. But I think our general thought is to try and migrate most of these classes towards that cost of service study. Because to your point about it having a low income rate, essentially that's what we're doing here. Or if you take, for instance, the municipal rate. The municipal rate is double-digit percentage points below cost of service study. That's essentially, bless you.
I think I think our policy last time, and it probably is the same, is that we're looking to rebalance that as well, so long as that we don't think the impact.
Why not rebalance it a little bit more?
Yeah,
That's
the impact is so unfair that it hurts.
6%.
Yeah, we don't want to hurt one.
You don't want to hurt. I mean, we like I think large business. We like employers here. I think it's good. So we can't, So it's hard to. It's good to speak in terms of policy. It's harder to speak in terms of what does that mean.
Yes.
So that's why I was asking the direct question. What's the impact to you?
And plus, you haven't seen a full year through yet, right?
Right.
So, you're going to have that, and then you're going to have another increase as far as, the business goes. On the residential, I know there was, 7 below us. What were the towns below us?
Let's check it out.
I just can't read that.
Yeah, I know it's pretty small. So we've got,
Boylston.
they're all munis, of course. So there's Holden, West Boylston, Danvers, Middleton, Littleton, Mansfield, and Hudson. A lot of them in this area.
And that's not assuming that their rates aren't going to go up.
Right, and actually this data is from September. We don't know if they've increased their
Right.
rates since then either. We won't know that until the next study comes out.
Well, also, if we take a look at, as an example, again, the larger, that fourth category, the larger
Industrial?
industrial, you know, what does a 1% increase in rate actually bring in overall revenue versus a 1% increase in revenue for residential?
Yeah.
You know, that may be that because we are so low, I'm just talking out, I have no dog in this hunt, but I mean, if we raised it 1% in that area, or the gain is much better, and they're still way down on the bottom of the.
And you're still balancing your cost of service on it.
Exactly.
Well, the street lighting and the protective lighting is so far off, and like, look at how much we've already increased it, like.
But those are no dollars, right? That's no.
Yeah, I know,
dollars.
it's minimal, so.
But isn't that what we kind of go back to the town on? Because isn't that part of that?
Yes. So this is what the photo cell stuff will help with too eventually, if we choose to switch over to actual use charges.
So,
So you-
yes, I think that's kind of our approach, is we're looking at 3 scenarios. We're focusing on residential as the only class that is over cost of service study is a scenario where it's 0, and you can just see how that's distributed amongst the other classes. A 2%, I think, to the point you're making, just to see how that looks and where the other classes would, how you'd see movement in other classes, and just a 5%
Across the board.
And then you can see the numbers and how that impacts everything.
Yeah, my other thought on this is that on a low income rate, which may very well be beneficial to many people, is that some of those folks are living in houses that are so energy inefficient
Yeah.
that, you know, is there some other way besides just rates do we take a look at, you know,
Yep.
making them more energy efficient? I don't know.
We do have income adders for a lot of our rebate programs. So if you're income qualified, you get an extra, dollar sum if you're in that bucket. So we do think about that. With that, what we were thinking is we could kind of mirror what we did on the internet side, which has been pretty successful overall. So we could kind of follow that same concept. So folks would have to qualify based on pre-existing criteria and recertify each year. I don't think it would be a big group of people, and like I said, we can put it into the impact into this modeling, kind of show you what it would be like if we went live with it May or later in the year.
Yeah, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but on some of the low income stuff is that, you know, we saw on, when we did the senior discount, doing it away, that we had people that had been using their parents' discount,
Yep.
and certainly could have afforded to be paying a full rate. And
That's what you were doing with your mom?
yeah. That's why we're keeping her on life support. It's,
Yes, but there's always.
I am going to hear about
There's
that.
always, there's always going to be that, though, Bob.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? There's always going to be somebody who, like, doesn't do
Takes
the right
advantage.
thing.
Well, that's why we have folks recertify.
Yeah, we have a really great certification program. We're supposed to mitigate against all that, and that's
Yeah.
why we
No, that's
endorsed
good.
it. It was a great idea. I think we hopefully got past it. There's always that concern of fraud or whatever, but
Yeah, and we saw that at a past municipal where somebody drove in a 6-digit car. Meanwhile, it was on the low income rate, and maybe they were leveraged debt, crazy. But it was more they at one point had qualified, so that's why we moved at that point there to you got to yearly qualify, right? Because one guy would even brag about it, like I'm on a yearly. It's like, okay, well, guess what?
Not
We're
anymore.
gonna approach this,
not
and that's
anymore.
why we do that here too.
Well, the bottom line, let me come forward, though. I think it's a good effort that we need to take a look at.
Yeah.
you know what we already told you the policy, and we've already endorsed the low income on the cables. No reason not to be consistent in my view, but so I think you kind of already have our guidance. But
Be sure.
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Do you need anything else from us for now? You just got some feedback.
So should we go with these 1, 2, 3? There's actually 4 I put in here because we could do with the latter one, bring everything up to cost of service, but we could also designate a rate of return just in terms of the margin they're bringing per rate class 2 and look at it that way. So say our overall return for the year we want to shoot for is 8%. We could apply that to each individual classes as well. Theoretically for a low income rate, we would have maybe a 0% return and then that would help us toggle with the other rate classes. So maybe we'll do those 4.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So we discussed doing the 5% across. That was going to be
That
one
was,
presentation,
that was the peanut butter
right?
spread, 5%.
Okay.
Right.
And then we're dealing with the residential then on the other ones. Like, how are we going to adjust residential and what impact that has on the other?
Exactly.
So we could go with a 0, and then we could go with a
Somewhere in between.
2.
Yeah, and then it's a comparison of all the rates as to how much is to be gained by what percentage increase. You know, who do we hurt the least by?
Sure.
Yes. And like you said, where's the biggest bang for our buck as well? And the other thing to note is the peanut butter scenario, the 5% across all the rates. That's what we model in the budget, just because it was a
Right.
simple thing to do. So if we diverge from that scenario, the budget, the revenue is going to look a little different. Just so you know, we can maybe
Yes, we'll
provide
show
it
that.
updated
Yep.
forecasting.
We revise all that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now what we've all been waiting for.
Oh,
I like.
You got to be quick. We don't have time.
Yeah.
I know.
I've been
We ran out of time a long time ago.
Yes.
Can we have the cliff notes on this one?
I will very good.
We're going to assume that everybody did their reading.
Exactly. No, I think that the most important part is just that first bullet point, which is why I also tried to put it up top, is it's been a busy legislative season, in particular for municipal light plants. So these 5 bullets, I'm always happy to answer more questions on. What we've been actively engaged in advocacy efforts to provide our municipal light plant feedback on. So you can see somewhat of the summary there, and I'll just go through these 5, and then, subject if you want me to go through more, I'd be happy to. But these 5, large building reporting, the issue we see there, basically we provide information to any customer, right? You're a customer of ours. What the proposed legislation would do is it would bypass the customer and require the utilities to provide the customer's data directly to the state. And one, that could be a burden for some of the smaller MLPs, but I think more importantly, that seems somewhat of a violation of privacy.
Yeah.
And so our feedback is that's fine. We're happy to provide our customer with as much as they want, but similar to a tax return, if you'd like their information, you should go directly to that customer and have them provide it to you. So that's been our feedback on that. The clean heat standard, as you can see, it's just attempting to throw more heating system conversion requirements. And then there's this alternative compliance payment. It's just, I think, in the interest of conciseness, it's just a very flawed approach to regulations that are not as would not be as successful as we are operating today. So it's just not something we're interested in. We think it's just bad policy. Advanced clean trucks, going back to our capital additions plan, just to try and tie everything together. We're doing our best to, stay on top of forecasted capital change-outs here. The advanced clean truck regulation, basically with existing law, ties our emissions requirements for vehicles in with California. And so what it basically says is it said even starting this month that you could not buy a bucket truck that was not a hybrid or electric, basically any type of emissions. And basically our candid and logical feedback is those trucks don't exist.
Yeah, right.
If you could find one, let us know. And 2, there are exemptions for public safety and even plow trucks. We have continually tried to point out that we're in that same category, and the very nature of our business is electric restoration. We're going into areas that have no electricity and no infrastructure, let alone trying to charge an electric bucket truck in the middle of a massive disaster zone.
Outage, yeah.
So, so again, just bad policy that we're trying to be supportive and understanding what the underlying goals are, but at the same time being logical. Building decarbonization warehouse, this is the big one that's a problem, which is basically suggesting that our programs aren't as robust as Mass Save, and we should all join the program and raise our rates 30% for Mass Save type of projects. And so I think that's a pretty obvious one, why that doesn't make any sense. And so we've been aggressively suggesting that that's not a good idea. And then just the clean energy bill is a smaller one, just again back to language and definitions of different resources. But really, the decarbonization, clean trucks, clean heat standard, those three are the top three that could have major impacts. And my view and majority public utility view is just bad policy. And so the goal is to understand what the objectives are, and
What are the chances these are going to pass?
Well, unfortunately, actually higher than usual. And so to the point where, and happy to answer further questions on this, where the meme group has set aside some funding for legal action to preserve some of the local rate-making abilities that this body has, and assuring that these policies are in the public good and public interest and can be proven to do so.
Yeah, these are not legislative, these are executive branch committees, right? That they don't,
Oh, is that what
yeah, it
this
doesn't
is?
have to go through the House and Senate.
It's a combination of the two, and on a few of these, they've suggested that they're not, in situations where perhaps law does not allow it, they will propose new laws that do allow it. So, in fact, at 10 o'clock, I was going to attend the day where there's a DPU hearing on how to pursue the energy burden across the state. Again, sounds predominantly IOU. However, in those proposals, one of the proposals, which I'll jump on right after this meeting, is to spread those costs out over not just, say, a distribution utility like a National Grid or Eversource, but across the state. So again, another, through increased costs on the private utility side, again, they're trying to find ways to just peanut butter spread that over a wider swath, which obviously is not advantageous in any way to Shrewsbury or other municipal light plants. So I'm looking at attending that. Again, you see all these different angles of risk, if you will, and so we're doing our best to say you're looking at this all wrong. Our model achieves your goals, not the other way around. But that was it, and then just some other noteworthy articles. Again, I
think
don't
we're
want to keep
in
any
pretty good
longer.
shape, Any questions on anything that had been reviewed that we can get this young man off to his next meeting? Okay. No, with that said, looks like our next meeting
The 25th.
25th.
going to be the Tuesday, the 25th of February at 8 a.m., and that's the week after school vacations. So I think we're covered, and that's something we agreed to earlier. So with that said, can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
and thanks, MC Liz, for helping us.
That's a-